Hi, and thank you for arriving at this video. What started off as a rejected graduation speech that never was, transitioned and evolutionized into this exclusive extended version YouTube video you're about to watch. You must listen and watch it in its entirety as each piece builds up to the very end. It took a lot of bravery for me to release this video about my comeback journey to UCLA, as I privately hid behind a lot of shame and stigma. I didn't want this speech to die in a dusty little corner of my desk drawer with no life and no purpose. I knew it had so much more to give, as my voice is greater than my silence. The year was 1991, 18 years old and fresh out of high school when Mom dropped me off at Hedrick Hall at the UCLA dorms. I got out of the car begrudgingly with the recent news of my mother having 6 months to live from a deadly diagnosis of full-blown AIDS. A ticking time bomb was officially planted on me that day. I had to walk around school, not telling anyone I had an invisible ticking time bomb attached to my mind and heart. That unsteady and unpredictable time bomb represented the anticipation anxiety I was feeling about not knowing when Mom's last day would become a reality. Here I was at the mecca of AIDS research, a pre-med student with no ability to save her. The best they could do is give her an antiretroviral cocktail of drugs that could only prolong but not save the short life that her few remaining white blood cells could afford her. After 4 long years, Mom succumbed to her AIDS battle, 63 days after an expected graduation date that completely eluded me. In between coming home on the weekends to visit and care for my mom, I lost myself in alcohol and depression. I couldn't focus in class and my performance was greatly hindered. My mind kept wandering and worrying about my mom. It amounted in repeated withdrawals and eventually academic probation. I had never told a college friend or anybody at school about my mother having AIDS for the fear of being treated differently or asked awkward questions. The stigma was so strong in the early 90s that it was not uncommon for people to ask, "Is she a prostitute or a drug user?" Mom was the complete antithesis of that. She was a single Catholic mom who immigrated to this country from Mexico as a teenager simply looking for the American dream. She worked diligently as a well-respected bilingual legal secretary and a court translator by day, and as a hairstylist by night, doing perms and hairdos out of a makeshift salon station in the garage. She was a divorcee that gave everything to her marriage with my dad, but finally threw in the towel after 17 years when Dad's alcoholism and abuse became life-threatening. Mom contracted HIV after her divorce in her quest to find love and respect, just like millions of single women are doing all over the world right now. Women were not considered high risk in the early and mid-80s for HIV. It was literally called GIDS, Gay Immunodeficiency Syndrome, because they thought only homosexuals could contract the disease. After 2 consecutive quarters on academic probation, I was given the dreadful news that I was dismissed from the university and asked to surrender my school ID. I broke down in tears when I was dismissed from the university. Not only did I not graduate in time for my mom to see before she passed, but now I was expelled as my friends and classmates were graduating. I was officially an outsider, no longer a Bruin. All those years I sacrificed in high school down the drain. I was now a total bust. I couldn't believe it. This son of a bitch bug had taken my best friend, my life coach, my #1 fan, mi querida madre, and now my most prized possession, my UCLA education. It wasn't right. I knew I was qualified and competent to succeed here. I took all the necessary AP classes in high school and had close to a 4.0 GPA. I literally entered my freshman year with 16 units shy of sophomore status. I was by no means an affirmative action case. I deserved to be here and had demonstrated that merit. So I walked into my counselor's office and asked Mr. Stanley if there was any way that the university could reconsider my dismissal because I had just buried my mother a week prior who died of AIDS. I poured my heart and he dropped his mouth. I was relieved and he was in shock. He couldn't pull out the petition for readmission form fast enough. He instructed me to type out my story immediately and to include any supporting documentation. Within 2 days, I had it filled with a copy of my mother's death certificate enclosed. I was 22 at the time, and Mom was 47 when she passed. For the next few days, my UCLA dream was in the hands of a committee. I didn't know who they were or how empathetic they would be to my extenuating circumstance. I could hardly sleep that week as my life was suspended in UCLA limbo. 5 long days later, Mr. Stanley called me with the best news of my life and said I was readmitted. I couldn't stop thanking him and the committee. I never told anybody about this occurrence. You are the first to know. I was elated and relieved. It was time to prove to them that they had made the right decision. It was then that I declared my new major, microbiology, immunology, and molecular genetics, in honor of my mother's illness and secretly to prove that I could withstand the rigors of one of the most challenging majors on campus. Like a detective trying to solve a murder case, I was determined and obsessed with learning everything there was to know about this vicious and deadly retrovirus called HIV that disables the human body's immune system. So I started from the beginning, taking all the necessary classes for my new major. My first quarter back after readmission, I got straight A's and made the honors dean list for the first time. That was my way of saying thank you to Mr. Stanley and the committee. Four years ensued as the year 2000 approached. I went to school consistently, exploring and enjoying my new major. My grades were consistently above average. UCLA really became like a home away from home, a place where I found men and women that cared for me and I respected, my professors, my counselors. I had no male role models being raised by a single mother. I went to UCLA to find normalcy, an escape from the grief of losing my mother to AIDS and my dad's vicious and abusive alcoholism at home. After Mom died, I was forced to move in with my dad. The psychological and physical abuse that Mom took from my father was now transferred to me. I was left with a grieving ex-husband that could not handle the loss of his possession and obsession, Yolanda. His guilt and demons flared up, and Grandma Cello and I were the favorite targets of his alcoholic rages. Moments of solace were far and in between, but I managed to keep studying amongst the chaos. Unfortunately, through this perseverance, I was exacerbating a severe case of PTSD that I had already acquired from the domestic violence of my childhood and my mother's untimely AIDS battle. However, the road started getting bumpy again as life took an unexpected twist. After losing a 7-year college relationship with my girlfriend, who understandably tapped out on my grief and anger, and losing my Grandma Cello, who stepped in as a second mom to pick up my tears, my life turned for the worse. Mom was gone, Grandma was gone, and finally my girlfriend. The 3 female rocks that I leaned on for love and support were evaporated from my life. It was too much for me to bear, and I imploded in that void. Life became unbearable at my dad's, and I needed a quick and easy way out to save my life. I was broke and desperate. I felt like I was a mouse living in a lion's cage. My escape became my only and entire priority, by any means necessary. With 6 classes left to graduate, my anger, my poverty, and grief got the best of me and I dropped out. I simply lost interest in school and everything that was good for me. I was a kite out of control with no stability of my own. I was literally a good kid gone bad, rebellious to the bone. Money and power were the only things that were attracted to me and soothed my pain. My dad said that I would never have his money and that I would never amount to anything. His psychological abuse left me feeling powerless and bitter. And I aimed to prove him wrong, and I did prove him wrong. But I lost my moral compass in the process. The wrong path eventually left me destitute and homeless. The drop between the cushiness of my life and the hardness of the car seat I was sleeping in was equivalent to a heroin withdrawal times 10. There I was at the bottom of the well once again, suicidal and hopeless, feeling ashamed and embarrassed for not finishing my degree and taking the wrong path. After all that work to finish, after I was readmitted by Mr. Stanley and the committee, I was left with no degree and a severe case of PTSD that left me isolated from friends and family for over a decade. I saw 11 birthdays fly right by me as I sat alone on my couch, isolated and full of regret. I truly thought I had expired all my chances to get my degree from UCLA. For years, I'd pretty much come to terms with the reality that I wasn't going to get my degree and that I would have to continue my life without it. The fighter inside me just couldn't accept that, and the incompletion kept haunting me. I was plagued with dreams of being back in school. All that hard work, every tough class that I grinded out kept replaying in my head. I kept thinking of my beloved grandmother who helped me buy molecular biology books with Social Security checks and secured me rides from elderly neighbors who would hike me up the 405 from San Pedro to class. I kept thinking about my single mother that gave me the confidence and nurture to get me accepted to UCLA from high school. Even through her illness that left her weak and frail, she remained the best UCLA mom ever. She would send me encouraging cards and care packages to the dorms for random holidays like Valentine's Day, Halloween, and Easter, reminding me how much she loved me. She cooked me my favorite Italian meal, mastacholi with meatballs, and hiked it up to the dorms. She desperately tried to make my college experience as normal as possible under very abnormal circumstances. It just wasn't right. Mom and Grandma Cello had invested too much time into me. I had to finish for them, so their efforts would not go in vain. I kept hearing my mother's voice saying, "Please, mijo, don't let my illness affect your education." One day, I received a call from the storage facility in Ventura that I had placed my remaining possessions after being evicted for the 3rd time in 2 years, and I was told that my unit had been auctioned off for delinquent payments. They said I was welcome to see if any personal effects were left behind. I went, and all my science books were gone, along with my treasured life possessions. The only thing that was left behind in a dusty little corner was a card my mother gave to me on my 22nd birthday before she passed. It said the words, "Dare to dream, dare to dream." That card finally inspired me to muster up enough courage to schedule a visit with my counselor once again. The year was 2010, and there I went down the 405, down my usual route to school, and exited Wilshire Boulevard. It had been 10 years since I had taken that exit. My heart was beating once again with my UCLA fate in the balance. I was to meet with my new counselor, Kathy Behrens. Wow, things had changed. New buildings had emerged. The student store looked like a mini mall, and every student had their head buried in a new iPhone. Mr. Stanley wasn't there anymore. He had retired. This was a real and raw testament of how much time had elapsed. Kathy looked at me nonchalantly and asked me, "Where have you been?" My life flashed by me, and she could tell instantly by the expression on my face that it was a long story. I was instructed that I was in good academic standing, holding a near 3.0 GPA, and that I was still eligible to come back to finish my bachelor's degree. I was shocked and angry with myself at the same time. I had let so many years go by in fear of hearing that I was ineligible to graduate. I procrastinated to avoid hearing that kind of unbearable news. It would have devastated me and exacerbated my life situation. For years, my friends and family just assumed that I had received my degree and I had kept the lie going to not face the disappointment. So with degree progress plan in hand, I went back to my car that I was living out of and started to make a plan to finish. I first had to get my life stabilized. Without that, there would be no degree. With financial aid out of sight, 15 years since I had touched a math or a science book, it was going to be the fight of my life. It was a monumental challenge. Math and science are advanced languages. The field of genetics had evolutionized significantly, where I had to update myself with new research tools that had been implemented since I last studied the subject matter. Without starting from the beginning, everything literally sounded like Japanese. I essentially had to relive and redo my freshman, sophomore, junior, fourth year senior classes through auditing. Auditing involves sitting in and taking classes in their entirety without a grade because I already had passed those classes many years ago. It's equivalent to being a player with no name on the back of your jersey. You get to participate in the game, but you get no credit for the final score. I had to relearn and establish the science and mathematics foundation that I needed to complete the courses that I left behind. Unfortunately for me, I left courses undone that were at the highest level of the subject matter. And that's what kept me running and avoiding and postponing and fearing that I could never finish my degree because I knew what kind of investment of time and effort it was going to require for me to catch up, decode, and complete this journey. In order for me to re-enter and be a competitive fifth-year senior in microbiology and molecular genetics at UCLA, I had to go over all the levels of science, starting back from basic freshman biology to chemistry, organic chemistry, biochemistry, molecular biology, genetics, bacteriology, virology, immunology, and some upper division courses, just to get the feel of the scientific language in the modern digital format in which the classes were being taught in. For my math mountain, I had to audit trigonometry, pre-calculus, differential calculus, and integral calculus just to be able to be prepared to take the multivariable calculus class that I left behind. This auditing phase on its own turned out to be a 6-year journey that I had to weave into my life struggles just to be able to eat and have a car. You can't cram all this information overnight because it's layered and cumulative in concept and terminology. It has to be done in a very gradual process so you can absorb everything and build on the knowledge of the previous course and then tie everything back together. It was scary to relearn this language I once knew. It was a very humbling experience to sit at a junior college as an adult in his 40s amongst kids, after once being a proficient and competitive UCLA student for many years. Ventura College ended up being my Big Bear academic training camp, akin to a boxer getting his body ready for his professional fight. Every time I thought of giving up, I just kept thinking about the spirit of perseverance that my mom displayed in her fight against AIDS. And I thought to myself, if mom could fight against all odds to live 4 years after a 6-month prognosis, I could fight for my degree. And I just kept living in her spirit, pushing myself forward one class at a time, one life struggle at a time, one foot in front of the other, trying not to look too far ahead so I wouldn't trip up on my footing like any steady and experienced mountain climber would. I treated every class like a separate and necessary base camp along my mountain climb. After auditing, I was now ready to go back and take the scariest plunge of my life back into UCLA. My training in auditing at Ventura College was over and had peaked. There was nothing left for me to do, and now for me to be able to complete my mountain climb and get my degree, I had to go up to the big leagues, UCLA, where I last was before I dropped out in the year 2000. So in the fall of 2015, I thought it would be a good idea to audit a few more classes at UCLA to reintroduce myself to the campus, instruction style, and the level of competition and complexity. Like a major league player just coming up from the minor leagues, I wanted to pinch hit for a little while to get used to the speed of the pitching until I got the nerve to be on the starting lineup. Things move faster since UCLA is on a 10-week quarter system and not the 20-week semester pace that most local community colleges are on. I also knew that classroom sizes were going to be bigger and personal attention was going to have to be proactively sought out. They don't babysit here. It's a much more independent environment. Although I had excelled at Ventura College, it was still yet to be seen if I could translate that success to UCLA. So I got in my 20-year-old car, ran the sign of the cross over my face and chest, as any scared Catholic kid would, and prayed that the car and I would make it through the first day of class. As I got off the exit, my heart started fluttering as I approached these grand and intimidating building structures of UCLA. UCLA had become my personal Vietnam. Every building and corner of campus triggered a minefield of emotions and memories of the past. There I was in my favorite and usual bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror, 20 years older, remembering who I used to be. I thought to myself, do I pick up where I left off? Do I start anew? Nobody knew me. Some probably confused me for a visiting parent or a professor. How do I re-immerse myself amongst the young? Do I act like nothing is different about our generational gap? Or do I just own it, explain it, and confront it? Like if it wasn't hard enough to climb that academic mountain once again, now I had to come to terms with the trail of losses and failures that I left behind here. I could see the images of old friends on benches and pathways that I hadn't talked to or seen since because of the shame of being a college bust that ended up pathetically homeless. I could see and feel my old college girlfriend who faithfully stood by my side for 7 years. I could smell her encouraging spirit and the sweet smell of her skin, holding hands with me as we took in the sun and the fresh air of the morning courtyard, staring into each other's eyes, discussing dreams of me being a doctor and us having a family and a house with a white picket fence. My fellow classmates were now the age of my 2 children that we lost to miscarriage. So many secrets and stigmas that had kept me silent for years were looking to find an escape, like the bubbles of a boiling pot of water looking to escape into steam. Everywhere I walked, I stepped on the shattered remnants of that ticking time bomb that said tick, 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 that finally exploded in 1995 when my mom passed away when I was just 22, still trying to find my way. And as fate would have it, as it always does, on this first day of class back to finishing my degree in 2015, 20 years after my mom's death, I accidentally made a wrong left as I approached the parking structure, and it took me straight in front of Hedrick Hall. Yes, that same dorm building that mom had dropped me off on that dreadful first day of UCLA. It was a full circle moment. I started trembling with a full-on PTSD panic attack. I could see my mom in her modest brown Hyundai hatchback, waving goodbye with pride and a smile, placing her group fingers on her puckered lips to gesture a final kiss as I walked into the entrance doors of that building. The stark memories and images of her kept me sweating with tears running down my eyes. All my fears came slapping me back in the face, and that's how my first day back to get my degree started. So I gathered myself together and I walked into my first class, molecular biology with Professor Perez at 8 a.m. It was a 4-hour back and forth commute with traffic from Ventura, California. I would wake up at 4 a.m. to be out the door by 5:30 to arrive at UCLA by 7:15 a.m., find parking, get a protein shake, and slot into class by 8 a.m. I walked in and humbly introduced myself to my professor and said, "Good morning. I'm a 5th-year MIMG student returning to get my degree after a 20-year gap. Can I please audit and receive the materials in your class?" To my relief, she said, "Absolutely, welcome back. Give me your email so I can send you the lecture slides every Sunday." And she did without fail. So I took a seat in the front row. I felt like everybody was staring at me and they could smell my fear. I kept doing reaffirming mantras in my head with my ego psyching myself out that I still had it. "Show them who you are. You ain't no bust. I'm here to compete and win by any means necessary. I'll work everybody out in this bitch if I have to. You feel me? It was just my feeble and desperate attempt to try to counter the real negative and scared voice in my head telling me, "You don't have it anymore. You're just wasting your time, and you're just a washed-up college bust. Dad was right. You let too much time go by, and now it was just too late. It's gonna be too hard for you, so just leave. Pack it up and leave." I was like a scared preschooler wanting to run out of class and go home, but I kept hearing my mother say, "Push, push, push, mijo." And I thought to myself, you came this far. They might have the advantage of recency knowledge, but I have life and I'm hungrier than anybody in this fucking room. I'm gonna leverage that to my advantage. Hunger, ganas, that's what my advantage is gonna be. I wanted to hear my academic voice again, and I knew I wasn't gonna succeed by being a passive observer of knowledge. I had to engage and participate. I had to get my hands dirty. So I closed my eyes, I held my breath, and I plunged into that pool. I just started raising my hand to ask and answer any questions in a lecture hall with 300 students. And there I went as I started swimming, one stroke in front of the other. Unfortunately, towards the end of the quarter, the transmission on my 20-year-old car with 230,000 miles failed, and I was devastated. Money started dwindling and things started getting tight. I could barely afford the $12 parking fee and the gas to commute to UCLA. Life again took me away from my dream, and I had to attend to the reality of living day to day again. And to top it off, my father was dying now with 3 months to live. But a magical thing happened though, before my dad passed, that set the stage for my heart and mind to be in the right place to finish. I got to see him sober for the first time in my life. We shared some of the most innocent and loving moments together. We reconciled and I forgave him for everything and told him I loved him. I finally relinquished the resentment that tormented my spirit for years. After my dad passed, I came back from the funeral disappointed that my father was not going to be able to see me graduate even if I had finished. I wanted him to see what I had become after being an embarrassment and disappointment to him for many years. I was fading again after a 3-year break. Now both my parents and grandparents were in the skies, and I was gonna have to dig deep and do this for a bigger reason. And that reason ultimately ended up being me. I now knew that I was enough, and committed to myself for once. But I still needed one last push, and that came in the form of an old email that was sent to me by Professor Perez, my molecular biology professor that I first came in contact with when I came back. She wrote in 2016 in response to me thanking her for letting me audit her class. I can't wait for you to send me the email letting me know that you have finished your courses here and you got your degree. I really respect your perseverance very much. I remember sitting on my couch after that long break and reading her message over and over until the accountability made me start crying. And I yelled to my best friend Cece, I gotta go back. I gotta go back. Look at them, they're waiting. She's waiting for the return email saying that I finished. Look, I can't let them down. They want me to finish. They believe in me. She said the word perseverance. Out of all the actively used words in the English vocabulary, 171,476 words, she used the word perseverance. And it rang in my head like a bell. Not any bell, a wake-up bell. That same church bell that rings 10 minutes till every hour on the UCLA campus to remind you how much time you have left to get to class. That's the word I wrote on my mother's gravestone. I live by and take inspiration from my mother's perseverance during her AIDS battle. I do LA AIDS walks every year with that word on my back. And to be described and seen that way was huge. I couldn't let my mother's perseverance go unhonored, and I had to keep pushing to keep the spirit of her perseverance alive. And in 2018, I finally enrolled officially in my first class for credit, MIMG 168, Molecular Parasitology. Not only was the tuition bill scary, but the competition was scary. My major is strict and full of overambitious pre-med students vying for a top spot on the grading curve. You have to beat people to get a good grade. Essentially, for me to pass, I had to outperform and beat half the members in my class, who had the complete advantage over me in having a math and science foundation that was recent and undisturbed by any prolonged absence from school. As if this challenge wasn't enough, I also had to beat my own self-doubt and test anxiety that left me frozen and out of breath during many exams. If you fail, they don't give you too many bites at the apple, and you could be subject to dismissal from the major real quick. And that's what kept me anxious, potentially spoiling and ruining the investment of time I put into the 6 years of auditing classes for no credit or evidence that I was even there. But my microbiology professors always kept me calm and steady and full of confidence. Professor Campbell accommodated me like a son and would check up on me after class. Professor Johnson went out of her way to provide me one-on-one office hours that accommodated my 4-hour commute to UCLA. She not only gave me her individual attention, but she provided a compassionate ear to my mother's story. She gave a damn and believed in my comeback. She gave me a mother's praise when I needed it the most. I sacrificed a lot of opportunities that could have saved me from unnecessary hardship just to stay committed to this journey. I was obsessed in the truest sense of the word. I didn't care about anything else except this degree. I was in a tunnel of my own, unbeknownst to my family and friends. I kept it secret and silent just in case I failed. I already had enough shame in my life, and I didn't want this to be another one if it didn't go right. They were already under the assumption and belief that I had finished, so to fail would be a double stab at my shame, because now I would have to reveal that I was a dropout and had failed at coming back to redeem it. I never went out on a date or went out to a bar throughout my whole comeback journey. I had a zero social life. Women have been my weakness all my life, and I didn't need another unnecessary distraction, addiction, or potential loss. For God's sakes, even my family started suspecting that I might be gay, which couldn't be further than the truth. I even quit smoking weed, my PTSD medicine, after a nasty 10-year hourly habit. Since easy money and gambling go hand in hand, I also had developed a compulsive poker addiction that kept me a slave to the local LA casinos for years. I put that demon down as well and never looked back. That withdrawal was a journey of its own. This was my journey to redemption, and nothing was going to get in my way. Even my UCLA professor said that she probably wouldn't have came back if it was her. That's when I had to confess to her that I had a severe case of OCD and I was slightly neurotic. And you had to be to attempt this academic climb up Mount Everest. Nine and one half years later, since my initial enrollment at Ventura College, I finished. I finally arrived at the summit and crossed that graduation stage on Father's Day with my bachelor's degree in microbiology, immunology, and molecular genetics in honor of my mother's illness. What I once perceived to be one of my biggest shames, being a UCLA dropout, ended up being a miracle opportunity to cleanse me of the sins of my past and allowing me to do good. It was the absolute life raft that my life needed. It's as if I left those classes undone intentionally to save me later. I healed leaps and bounds through my comeback journey. The pride and purpose it instilled in me restored the pieces of the broken man I was. I was once embarrassed and full of fears, not anymore. I came back to claim what was mine, to finish that journey that my mother set me off on at Hedrick Hall, and to fulfill the promise that I would graduate for us on her deathbed. It was surreal to finally live out my redemption. I remember pointing at the sky to honor my number one fan, my late mother, and as soon as I walked off the stage, tears of joy and satisfaction came flooding uncontrollably down my face. 30 years since my freshman year at 18 years old to finish. 30 years in a PTSD-fueled grief imprisonment, simply existing but never living. What a price to pay, but it was all worth it. I wouldn't do it any other way. It saved my life. It got me off the streets and aligned me with my life passions, teaching, speaking, and writing. I dared to dream, and now I dare you to dream. With love, strength, and perseverance, anything is possible. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I love you all. Happy graduation. Thank you for viewing my video, and please share it with others to keep the power of my story alive. I understand how much adversity there is in the world, especially right now. I invite you to join us on our Dare to Dream challenge. Hopefully, you'll find inspiration to never give up and to continue to challenge yourself and others to fight towards their dreams. It's never too late. Don't forget to follow me on social media to get release updates on my upcoming podcast and memoir in 2025. Talk to you soon.